You're recording.
Okay, thank you. I'll now call this meeting, this online public meeting of the Clark County Commission on Aging together. It is July 21st, 2021. My name is Chuck Green. I'm chair of the commission. You should be able to see tonight's agenda on your screen. If you can't see the screen, I will be announcing the agenda items as we move through the meeting topics. Due to COVID-19, meetings of the Clark County Commission on Aging will be held in a virtual meeting room. This will allow for safe participation by commission members, staff, and any resident interested in attending. Members of the public have joined as an attendee, which means you can see and hear the event. If you join via computer or mobile device, you can just hear the event if you join by phone. Other event participants cannot see your video and cannot hear your audio unless you are acknowledged by the commission chair or staff and are unmuted. Before we get to opportunities for you to provide comment, and we'll have a couple of those tonight, we'll have a short announcement of how that works and how you can join. That'll be a little bit later. This evening's agenda is planned as follows. Approval of the agenda. Approval of the April 21st and May 19th meeting notes. Approval of the June 16th retreat notes. A moderated discussion about food as medicine. Commission download from that after we've had that discussion. General public comment, officer elections, and then general communications and announcements from the commission. So before we start, I'd like to do a roll call of commission members who are present for this meeting. Once I call your name, please say, "I'm here," and we'll record you as present. So please don't forget to mute yourself when you're not speaking and unmute yourself when I call your name. So, Cass Friedland.
I'm here.
Amy Gross.
I'm here.
Megan McCarthy.
I'm here.
Tanya Stewart.
I'm here.
Pam Wheeler.
I'm here.
Larry Smith.
I'm here.
And Chuck Green is me, and I am here. We have two commission members who are absent tonight, Nancy Dung and Franklin Johnson. We do have a quorum, so we'll continue with our meeting. I'll first take a motion for approval of both the April 21st and May 19th, 2021 meeting notes. Please make sure you say your name when you make the motion and for the second so staff can record those. So, are there any changes to the meeting notes? If not, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Larry Smith.
Second, this is Pam.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Or any abstentions? Okay, the motion to approve the April and May meeting notes has been approved. I'll take a motion now for approval of the June 16th, 2021 retreat notes. I have a motion.
So moved. Larry Smith.
Second, Pam.
Moved and seconded to approve the June 16th, 2021 meeting notes. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, meeting notes from June retreat are approved. Next, we will be holding a conversation on the topic of food as medicine and what we can learn from our guests about food, aging, and health. And I'm interested in all three of them. So for this conversation, we have two guests. Megan will be introducing them and moderating the discussion. Megan, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. Yes, we are very honored to have two remarkable guests and various senses of the word. I'm going to start first with Dr. Neil Bernard. He is an adjunct professor at of medicine at the George Washington University School of Medicine in Washington, D.C., and president of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. He has led numerous research studies that investigate the effects of diet. He has authored more than 100 scientific publications and 20 books. He's also the editor-in-chief of the Nutrition Guide for Clinicians, a textbook that is made available to all U.S. medical students. So with that bio, and that's even, you know, an abbreviated version, clearly a nutritional rock star. So I'm very excited to kind of dive into some of the big questions. So I hope you don't mind. We're not going for any warm-up softball questions.
Thank you very much for this kind invitation.
Well, the first question that I'd love to get your perspective on is, what do you think is the hardest part of aging well in America?
What a great question. I don't know how many hours we have to talk. I have to say, I think the hardest part about aging well really is to, I guess I might put it this way, to break free of our cultural handcuffs, so to speak. What I mean by that is, I grew up in North Dakota, in Fargo. You may not have been there, but you might have seen the movie. That's where I grew up. And my dad was in the cattle business when he was young, and his father was, and his father was, and my cousins were, and everybody was. And my father didn't like it. He didn't like raising cattle. And he left, and he went to medical school, and he became the diabetes expert for Fargo, North Dakota. But the point is that we still stayed in this culture. And it's not just Fargo or North Dakota, it's throughout the Western world, is that we have a culture where we eat in a certain way. And when my grandpa had a heart attack and died in his early 60s, we thought he was old. That's what happens when you're old. And when my other grandfather lost his memory and his heart was beating, but his ability to know anyone was gone, we thought he was old. That's what happens when you're old. And my father was the diabetes expert at the Fargo clinic, and when he would come home, he'd get home about 6:15, he'd sit down his bag, and he had seen probably 20 people with diabetes, and I never once heard him say that anyone ever got better. Never. And since I've been in Washington, D.C., and we've been doing a lot of research on this very issue, everyone gets better. And you can't make progress in medicine or in health in general unless we address the causes, see how the causes come into conflicts. We have the desire to break free of these issues, but we can't really see it as long as we're just stuck in our culture. And so I don't mean to condemn Fargo. Fargo's a great town, and North Dakota's a great state, and the people there are great, but my family, most everybody, is so heavily influenced in preconceived notions about what aging is, what's inevitable, what breakfast is, and to be able to break free of preconceived notions, including what we put into our bodies, and to think more broadly, that's very difficult. And forgive me for this long-winded answer. I'm just going to tie it up with one quick defense of the human race, which is that we are right to resist change. We are right to defend our traditions and our culture, because and it's not just humans. You see this with a chimpanzee. A chimpanzee's toddler will run off into the edge of the path and find some berry that the toddler's mother knows could be poisonous, and will not let the toddler eat it. Now, she doesn't know it's poisonous. They just know that they don't eat that one. And humans are the same way. We are skeptical of a new way of thinking because it could hurt us, and that's true. And sheep will run away from sound in the distance. Is it a wolf? Is it thunder? I don't know, but I'm not going to wait and find out. So we tend to be very conservative. We tend to stick with what has stood by us, we believe, even when it's often very, very short-sighted. So my point is that I think that the hardest issue about aging is that we are sort of handcuffed by the ideas that we have had about what it means and what I can change and what I cannot change. And the beauty of it is that although that is our nature, to defend that, we can let new information come in and empower us. And through us, we can empower lots of other people, whether they're our patients or our parents or other people. So I hope that's a useful answer.
It's a very useful answer. And I would say that there are similarities between Vancouver, Washington, and Fargo. And certainly, understanding that, it is a challenge that affects all Americans. So we're not unique in that. But I think for the commission and certainly, those that are passionate about aging well in America, we want to be part of the solution to break free from those handcuffs. So if you had a magic wand, per se, to wave and change something that would help us break free and help get us closer to, reimagining what aging looks like, what would you use the magic wand for?
I would shift our input, our dietary input, away from animal products and toward plants. If we did that really well, our health would revolutionize to such an extent that we wouldn't have to advertise it very much. The effects would be really quite profound.
That's a great answer. And this might kind of tie back into a little bit of what we were just discussing is, what do you see as the biggest myth or misconception about aging?
That aging means infirmity. And it shouldn't be. People talk about sort of the trajectory of your life. For many people, they start to die when they're in their 30s. By that I mean you feel out of shape, your energy is starting to be depleted, and you end up on medications, and you got weight you didn't want to have, and when you're 40, you're on more medicines, you get more side effects, and you have this, that, and the other thing, and we compare notes with others about our health rather than other things, and by the time we're 50 and 60, it's quite normal to be overweight, have type 2 diabetes, elevated blood pressure, to be on Lipitor. All these things are normal and are gradually declining, and eventually we die. And I would try to choose instead of the slow decline, the sort of the box-shaped life, which is you're not going to live forever, but you hopefully live really well, and then you die suddenly. And personally, I'm planning to die in a flaming inferno in the Monaco Grand Prix. It was my car hits the wall, and that was it at age 107 or something like that. So
I love that. So as we are trying to be ambassadors of kind of this re-envisioning of what aging can look like, do you have any books or movies or podcasts or just anything that you recommend to help kind of spread the messaging that is easy to absorb for anyone and easy to access?
Sure. I mean, there are lots of great things. There are so many great authors. I'll just mention a few. Dean Ornish has done revolutionary work on reversing heart disease, so much so that his programs are now paid for by Medicare because it's a whole lot safer and cheaper than a bypass. Caldwell Esselstyn is very much the same camp, has showed that heart disease, our #1 killer, is something that we have much more power over than we had thought we had before. Also in this space, John McDougall, Michael Greger, Caldwell, I mentioned Caldwell Esselstyn already, Colin Campbell. Many people have been inspiring other people. I'll mention a couple of my own books if people are interested. I write books when I think there's something that's really cool and important that people need to know about. So my most recent one is all about hormones, which affect every aspect of your life, whether it's insulin or thyroid hormone or estrogens. And so I wrote a book called Your Body in Balance that came out exactly when the pandemic started. So I haven't really had a chance to go around and lecture. But anyway, Your Body in Balance is all about making menopause work for you, dealing with diabetes and all kinds of other things. Anyway, you'll see. It's got some great recipes from Lindsay S. Nixon. Two other resources I'll just mention really quickly. One is a free app called the 21-Day Vegan Kickstart. It's we designed it for physicians to use, but the public really likes it. It's in English and Spanish, and it's menus and recipes and cooking videos. And then our website is pcrm.org, and it's got lots of great recipes and cool stuff, and it talks about our randomized trials that are coming out. We just released one on Wednesday on a new approach to menopause that was dramatically effective for vasomotor symptoms. So be glad to talk about any of that.
Okay, so we have lots of homework to do. I know that there's going to be a good amount of questions from our commissioners and the public. So I'm going to shift over to Suzanne, and then we'll be able to kind of rejoin and have a robust discussion around answering some of those questions and answers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next guest is Suzanne Washington. She currently serves as the CEO of Meals on Wheels People, and she's been there since 2014. Prior to that, she was the executive director and leader for 25 years at Impact Northwest. And before that, she was a pro basketball player. So she is one of our local superheroes, and I'm so excited that she is here with us today.
Hi there. Thanks for
Hi.
having me.
Okay, I'm going to ask you basically the same set of questions to have kind of a local perspective as we kind of compare, our national leading experts and research and how that translates kind of operationally and how we literally care for our community. So what do you see as the hardest part of aging well, specifically in Vancouver, Washington, Portland metro area?
Well, I do agree with Neil that we have to deal with the stigma around aging and people aging before their time. The people we're serving, many, if not most, are already well down that path where they're having mobility challenges, physical changes, mental health changes, losing friends. Access has changed to neighbors, friends, family who are no longer available. So I think for us, providing nutritious food is super important. One, to deal with all of those changes for folks who already have chronic conditions, don't have money to buy food, aren't able to cook food. So without good nutrition, and we've moved towards medically tailored meals. So as far as food as medicine, we understand food is medicine, and we want to make that food as healthy as possible, whether it's plant-based or not. Many of our folks are not going to eat a completely plant-based diet yet, but we're working towards that. And I think the other thing that's huge with that is isolation creates even bigger problems. So we can provide the greatest nutrition on the planet, and if people are completely isolated in their homes, they are not going to thrive anyway. So we're trying to really do that combination of providing really good nutrition and that human connection they need to go with it, and to enable them to deal with all of those changes and stay healthy for as long as possible.
Mm-hmm. And that has been particularly challenging the last 18 months.
Yes.
So if we've learned under our lessons learned about how crucial that is. Okay, so I'm giving you the magic wand to try to solve one problem or one solution that would get us closer to the world we want to live in. What would you use it for?
Well, I think a magic wand to give us enough resources for every single person who needed it, regardless of the reason, would be super helpful, so that we had enough funds to, for example, we added more than 1,000 people in Clark County, close to 1,000 people in Clark County due to the pandemic. Fortunately, we're our own nonprofit and fundraising was great, so we were able to keep up with it. Much of the United States, they don't have that, they don't raise that money, or they don't have the ability to. So as the cost of every food product we use, raw food, doubled in some cases, we were able to keep up with that. But I know many Meals on Wheels around the country had to cut back on the quality of their raw food, for example. So they're making meals with a piece of chicken that is more bone than protein, right? So I think that would still be my magic wand, have enough resources. Fortunately, we have thousands of volunteers that help us do the work, and we could not do without it. But I think other than using that magic wand to get those resources, but it also helped change thinking about the aging process so people were able to deal with that cultural stigma long before they got to the place where they think it's too late to do anything about it. And I do think we deal with lots of folks who have chronic conditions or they're overweight, diabetic, isolated, and I think it's too late to do anything about it, which also is a huge issue.
Yeah. That might be your answer to my next question about what do you think is the biggest myth? Is it that, once you're sick, you can never get healthy again, or that it is always has to be a downward slope?
I think those two are part of them. And since I've already spoken about them, I'll do one other that we find a lot. Is that idea that older people only need to eat whatever they feel like eating. Because as we age, sometimes how we taste things changes. We have just so many changes that I think our body tricks us into thinking we're full when we're not, that we can eat sugar all we want because we're going to die anyway. I mean, whatever those are. And I think it's really important to know, we really need to eat healthier all along the way, even if we don't feel like it. And that's a huge challenge, I think, for us.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. Okay, and lastly, what do you recommend as far as documentaries, books, podcasts, or just anything that you think helps share and makes kind of this education easy to remember and kind of, no pun intended, digest?
I think probably the one I would say, because it's easy to use and you get a lot of information without too much work, is to check out the Food as Medicine Coalition website. It's just it's FIMCOALITION.org. So FIMcoalition.org. And it really has great information, including research that's going around all over the country about how nutrition and providing meals to older people of all age and people of all ages, really, because it's not limited to just older folks, but how crucial it is, and how if you combine that with what we're trying to do at Meals on Wheels people with that human connection at the same time, regardless of who that comes from, that it really is hugely impactful. And there's lots of research there and recipes and all sorts of things that really can inform people in an easy way and pass it on easily.
Mm-hmm. Those are all great resources. Like I said, I think when we walk away with lots of homework, that's the best kind of conversation. So our commission is actually made up with a fair amount of medical and healthcare professionals, and I know they are dying to ask questions here. Just having both of your perspectives on, how we serve our community and how we are ambassadors of this information, and how we, as we're looking at the planning, even from a community level, the county, the city, sometimes that's health policy that can be incredibly powerful. And another way of waving a magic wand that is not magical, but slow and steady, is that we might be able to align some of the health policy to support, healthy aging. And that's what we look at as far as all the infrastructure. So our transportation and our housing and all of those things. And we try to be the best partners we can be to our providers, Meals on Wheels. So I'm going to open it up to the commission here. I hope I'm not overstepping, Commissioner or Chair Chuck, but I want to get a good opportunity for individuals to ask questions to our guests.
That's the first time I've ever been called Chair Chuck. So actually, I do, and then I'll just kind of turn it back over to the commission. The last couple of years, even pre-COVID, we've heard the topic of food insecurity and, what are these GMOs that people keep talking about? Is something that's organic really organic? How have you addressed those questions when we've started talking about healthy diets, especially as we age? I guess I'll open that up to anybody who wants to answer it.
And I might ask you to go first and see if you have strong opinions on GMOs and organic labeling.
You'd think I'd know that after 18 months. You have to unmute. If you don't unmute, you have to talk really loud. Yes, GMOs are mostly animal feed. When I go back to Fargo, all the corn and all the soy is all animal feed and it's all GMO. There is GMO food used for human consumption as well, but you can avoid it by choosing organic. And I think that's a good choice. We don't really know that the GMO is dangerous, but it's an experiment I don't really want to be part of exactly. When it comes to making food available for people, though, the cheapest foods happen to be the healthiest foods. And there's kind of some mythology about that. People imagine that to eat healthy, I've got to go to Whole Foods and spend big money on hand-rolled sushi or rolls or something like that. But the healthy foods are things like beans and rice and vegetables and fruits. And when the cheese and meat aren't in your grocery cart anymore, you save, the average family of four saves maybe about $1,500, $2,000 a year eating in a healthy way. And that means that your food goes farther. It reaches more and more people. There are simple foods that kids often do very, very well with. And you have resources for other people. And then you also don't need quite so much medical care, and so you're a cheap date.
Suzanne, are you seeing individuals requesting organic or asking questions about GMOs? Does that cross your radar?
A little bit. I think more people are open to different foods. Like when we introduced quinoa 2 years ago, most of it was like, what is that? I'm not eating that stuff. So we try to mix it into rice so that's sort of hidden. It's on the label, but maybe they'll begin to appreciate things. So it's sort of the opposite for us. Less concern about GMOs, less concern about organic, even hormones. I'm generalizing. I mean, we have those that are really concerned and check that label and don't eat things because of preferences, but it's really, I think, more of a struggle to open people's eyes to new foods, to less meat and potato kinds of foods, especially on our older side. So we tend to see that much more often than a request. The newer requests are more for more vegetarian options versus something like, I don't want to eat anything that's a GMO. We try to buy all as much local as we can, healthy as we can, and put that in the meals. But the vegetarian is the biggest request for more and more options there.
That's great.
Thank you. So other commissioners, I'm going to kind of open it up for anybody to jump in. And then Megan, I think since I'm a transportation person, if you want to be the traffic cop and feed the questions to where they should go.
Absolutely. Well, I know Tanya, Dr. Stewart is also a huge fan of both of these individuals. So I know she has some questions.
I'll start with one. So thank you, Megan, and thank you, Suzanne and Dr. Barnard. So I'm interested in just always tracking how the money flows in healthcare that pretty much determines how people practice medicine. And how where the money comes from, how the payers pay for things often is identified or determined by policy. So it's kind of a payer and policy question, and you can decide how you want to answer this question. But how do we get better buy-in from those who are making those decisions, like how the money is flowing, to improve access to healthy whole foods in the patient world. So we pay for pharmacy, we pay for medications. How do we get kind of that buy-in to look at food from a different angle?
Will I jump in on that one?
Sure.
Terrific question, first of all. One thing, currently, procedures pay better than guidance. In other words, if in my clinic, I run a clinic, and in our clinic, we would get paid far more if we were to amputate people with diabetes feet than if we were to guide them to a diet and lifestyle that would allow them to keep them. We would be paid far more for laser surgery on their retinas than we would by guiding them to lifestyle changes that would allow them never to need it. Surgeons nowadays, typical surgeons are making between $500,000 and $1 million a year. And primary care doctors are making a fraction of that. And practices that employ them lose on average about $150,000 per doctor that they bring in. Which is why they're all getting swallowed up by huge hospital conglomerates, because the primary care doc is just the welcome mat to the hospital. And so what am I saying? Stop paying so much for procedures. And so that we're doing more guidance. Pay for dietetic care. But dietitians are sometimes as ignorant as doctors when it comes to food. And that's saying a lot, because they're not necessarily taught the right things. And so we have to make sure that people understand the key things that affect health. For example, heart disease is reversible and that it's caused by certain factors that are identifiable. Diabetes is not caused by eating bread. It's caused by the buildup of intramyocellular lipid that can be changed. And I know that's a word that endocrinologists have never even heard of, despite the fact that all this research has gone on. But it's important that medical schools teach it, that hospitals model it in the same way as a generation ago they threw out smoking. And I was one of the people who was buying Merit menthols at my hospital gift shop. And when our hospital said I couldn't smoke in the hospital anymore, I quit. We still serve bacon and sausage and really unhealthy things in my hospital. And we should stop doing that. So we should model it. We should teach it in medical school. We should help people to get over their natural nervousness about quitting smoking and eating unhealthy foods and that kind of stuff. So, all right. Anyway, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
Yeah, and I think on my side, we've been working on two different fronts. One is constantly working with our federal partners to understand how important nutrition is on that food as medicine realm. So we need more funding just for nutrition, but also that we need it to expand it across the country to do it more as those medically tailored meals to make sure people get what they need once they do have some of these conditions. The other one is we're working with folks like Peace Health, Providence, Kaiser, where we are doing programs, both prevention as well as transition out of the hospital, to provide people with healthy food, either again before they enter the hospital or as they come out, and doing some of the research. And in fact, right now we're in sending up a research project with Kaiser, and it's going to run through December, where they are really tracking the benefits both on the financial side as well as the savings. For example, if we feed them for 90 days when they transition out of the hospital, that they're not going to be readmitted or anything like that. So they're tracking both the financial as well as the medical aspects of that. And hopefully we'll have some good research. And that's what I was mentioning with that Food as Medicine Coalition. That coalition is across the country, and they're really trying to do research all across the country that supports this idea to then begin to change people's minds and say, let's put a little more money up front versus into procedures, and then do more prevention so we have fewer hospital admittance, fewer procedures done.
Suzanne, can I just do a quick follow-up question to that? So I was with an organization that worked with a national company that would ship food boxes to patients. And I, as I was vetting this organization, it'll be unnamed, the food that I received was just very heavily processed. It was not something that I would consider healthy. There was not any, maybe there was one apple, but there was nothing that was really healthy and whole food as I would define it. What more can we do as citizens or otherwise to really help, even if it's national companies, that it's more important to support local, to build it local, and to partner with organizations like your own. How are you able to, or if you have partnerships with national groups? I know you described a few that are local, but how do we overcome that? I mean, getting food from where it's grown to where people live as close as possible is the ideal state, correct?
Well, we are working with with all of the Meals on Wheels providers around the country, and so is the Food as Medicine Coalition. So we have Meals on Wheels America, which is more of a lobbying kind of group for federal funding, but they've taken on this issue to help support research and disseminate that information around how important food is. And because locally we're not shipping it, we're delivering it just like we do to our older folks every day. And with that comes that kind of wellness check. So we have eyes and ears on that patient who's sent home from the hospital. A week in, they're doing great. We're delivering food. A week or 2 weeks in, they're no longer getting out of their chair and something is obviously wrong. So we can send an alert back. So we're working with those nutrition providers for older adults all around the country to be ready to take this issue on and be able to do it. For example, in the state of Washington, we work with the Nutrition Providers Network, and we've been, before COVID hit, we'd had a year-long series of meetings to help build capacity in every one of those organizations to be able to do this food as medicine and get contracts. So if we're working with Peace Health in Vancouver, why can't Peace Health in Eugene get the same service from a Meals on Wheels provider? And so from our standpoint, that's kind of the direction we've been working in the Pacific Northwest. There's a Food as Medicine Coalition in California, for example, where all the providers are part of it. We're trying to do the same thing for Oregon and Washington, and then link to that national Food as Medicine Coalition to do this very thing.
Thank you.
Right, other commissioners, not seeing any hands raised, so.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes, this is for you, Suzanne. You talked about the importance of not only good diet, but human connection. Could you describe what your organization does to support the human connection component? And again, if you had your magic wand and could wave it, how would you increase that component?
So we're working on several fronts. You all probably know how we use volunteers like Larry Smith, who's been a deliverer of ours for a zillion years. But we've had to reduce that through the pandemic, and we understand that's not always possible to see everybody every day. So we started a friendly chat program where we're making thousands of calls through hundreds of volunteers to just call and have a chat. And we do wellness check calls. So we have trained volunteers and staff who are also making very specific wellness check calls because we can't see through the pandemic, we can't see everybody every day. We deliver once a week instead of 4 or 5 times a week. So those wellness check calls are really to make sure, like in the heat, if they're not prepared for 116-degree weather, what do they need? Can we get them fans? Can we get them education around? They need maybe cold water to blow through that fan. Those kinds of things. So we're on that. Do they have a primary health provider? Do they have any issues going on that we need to connect them to somebody else with resources? The friendly chats are purely, hey, you may not have a family member to talk to, you don't have a neighbor to talk to, you're isolated, and our volunteers are just going to call and say, hey, what's going on? You want to talk about the weather, your dog, whatever it is. And that's been really successful because people are opting into those. So we call and ask them, hey, we've got this program. And I think we have over 600 people said, yeah, I'll take a friendly chat call, and we have about 300 volunteers. We're also working on the technology side. So we've been getting grants and putting money towards getting people internet access, grandpads or iPads to be able to communicate, helping them set up that they can talk to their daughter in, Florida. So we're working on all of those fronts. And I think the magic wand at this point, I would do two things. One, immediately we need more volunteers who are willing to just call people and chat. It's hard for people who are shy and don't know what to talk about. So it really is one of those things. You like to talk on the phone and you're able to keep a conversation going. The other magic wand would be to get free broadband, get internet access to people. It's a huge issue. We've gotten some funding to pay for 6 months of internet, and then we're working on, well, what about after that, right? So they get used to calling people. So we're trying to work with both just a basic telephone call as well as that internet access so they can Facebook friends or virtual whatever. And I think that if people had greater access to wireless or just internet, people would be a lot better off.
Amy?
Right.
Thank you. That wasn't Chuck. Okay. Dr. Bernard, I've been a fan for many decades. You were talking about how people tend not to want to change what they've always done. I haven't had any animal products for about 8 years. And recently I invited some people over for, I guess you could call it a dinner party. It was religiously based at my house. And the traditional foods are chicken and chicken soup. And I served salmon and a raw veggie plate. And the questions come as, not even chicken? When I say, excuse me, I don't eat animal products. The other thing is I haven't had any alcohol in 20 or 30 years, and I get the same question. Not even a beer? Do you have any, I know you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Do you have any phrases that seem to get through to people better than others?
Oh, great question. I think for us in our clinical work, it really depends on what the person wants improved. People come in to see us because they want something better. It's not that they want a diet change, but they want their diabetes to get better typically. Or we just did a study now on hot flashes. So we had lots and lots of women who are in their mid-50s or 60 and they couldn't sleep at night because of hot flashes. They want to get better. So what we have to do is take about 2 minutes or 3 at the outside to describe how foods play a role in diabetes or how foods play a role in hot flashes, because the person wouldn't think they do. Hot flashes are treated by medication, and so is diabetes, and how could food possibly make a difference? And so we'll explain it. And in the case of diabetes, for example, I'll take an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and I'll draw an oval, and I'll say, this is a muscle cell in your body. And your muscle cell is driven by glucose, that's its fuel, and the glucose isn't getting into your cells. That's called insulin resistance, you got diabetes. And why is that? And why is that not working? It's because your cells, you can't see this, but if I looked inside your cells with a magnetic resonance scanner, I guarantee you I know what I'll find. You're filled with fat particles. Where do those come from? Well, it came from that salmon you ate, or it came from the chicken you ate, or it came from the cheese, or whatever. And if I stop doing that, will my diabetes gets better? Let's see. So I don't know how long that took. I'm gonna call that 2 minutes. I'm done. Then they go to the dietitian who meets with the patient and their reluctant spouse, and they talk about, gee, here's what I have for breakfast, what can I have instead? And they take an hour or 45 minutes and and the beauty of it is you don't have to confront their skepticism. They should be skeptical, but you don't have to believe in penicillin, you just take it. And so they draw up a menu and the patient just follows it for a while, and very soon they get results and they feel better. And so they want to continue. But it's important to tell people how the foods work in their body. what will happen to them, and then they just try it. And you've got to see, you have to make a powerful diet so that they'll get better fast. And that's what makes people a believer and allows them to want to continue with their changes.
Larry Smith, you had your hand up for a while.
And it's for Suzanne, and it's one of the things that's always bothered me. I do a little work down at the food pantry. And of course, I worry about the food banks and the pantries because they get a lot of animal products in. A lot of the stores, that's what what's not being sold is donated to food pantries. And then, of course, the food pantries in return are giving those products out to and food boxes and so forth. And I don't know how do you wrap your hands around that so we can educate that a little bit more, because food is food, and you're trying to put it in the hands of individuals that don't have food. And if it's animal products, then so be it. And then our food pantry, the downtown food pantry, they get some choices there. And obviously, animal products are top of the line: beef, chicken. But how do you get it? How do you educate that portion? How do you deal with those types of individuals that certainly don't have the financial choices that they can make? All they're interested in is staying alive for the next day or so with a food box.
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge, food banks and food pantries, about what they're able to get, that because so much of it is donated. I know that many of the food banks around the country are raising funds, and hopefully that in the raising of those funds, they're helping to purchase those non-animal products. I don't know how to answer that, Larry, as far as how we can get that done. I think it is an education. I'm on the Oregon Hunger Task Force, along with the Oregon Food Bank CEO, and we often bring up that, again, magic wand. If we have enough resources that we're not only dependent on what is donated, then we can make sure the purchase of raw foods is healthier from the get-go. So it's a long-term process, and it's a issue with the federal government, again, of what they allow SNAP benefits to purchase, or food banks to what they send to food banks. So
Yeah.
I don't have a great answer for that one.
Absolutely agree. It's a long-term issue.
Your hand up.
Yeah, Suzanne, I was wondering if your volunteers would feel comfortable with that 2 or 3 minute educational sort of description about the diet that you're providing, as sort of Dr. Barnard had mentioned. Would they feel comfortable being able to say something like that at the times of deliveries as part of that conversation and furthering that education?
Some definitely would, and some would not. So what we try to do is in our orientation talk about that when we orient volunteers who are going to be delivering food. And we also send a food for thought out every month to everybody who is receiving meals. And we try to put education in there with exactly the kind of things that Dr. Bernard's talking about, with small bits that people can read and think about, and hopefully that helps support the volunteer at the door. But like anything, some will and some won't. And if they get those questions and they're not comfortable, they will hopefully go back and tell our site managers who are providing, them with their route, that then we can follow up with that person and maybe do a little bit more of that.
Thank you.
Could I jump in on that really quickly? I really liked what Suzanne was talking about earlier, which was not just providing healthy foods, but also providing connections and providing internet connections. And that allows people to talk with each other. So you don't have to have one client talking with one volunteer. You can have one volunteer talking to 500 clients, perhaps. And we learned about this, at least I learned about it with the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, suddenly we couldn't do library talks and things like that. I couldn't do a grand rounds in a hospital anymore. It was everybody's kind of at home. And at the same time, people were really more in need than ever before. If you had diabetes before, you know, you might die slowly, but if you had diabetes and COVID comes in your house, you could be dead in 14 days. So it became really urgent to get the message out. So what we did was we set up a program called Fight COVID with Food. And the idea wasn't that food is going to knock out the virus. The idea is that food can improve your diabetes, so you're less vulnerable, or can improve your waistline, so you're less vulnerable, that kind of stuff. And so we started marketing it, particularly in economically disadvantaged neighborhoods, which you can just do social media marketing by zip code. You just pick the poorest zip codes. And the first class, we had more than 1,000 people in this class, and it was free. And so I had 3 people teaching it, and you know, how much does that cost? And we brought in some people. We brought in Eric Adams, he's now running for mayor of New York, actually, but he went vegan and got rid of his diabetes, has become this big advocate. So he joined us, and the head of the Navajo Nation, also similar story, Jonathan Nez, joined us as well to talk about his own experience. So it was a very diverse group. And the point I'm making is that, as Suzanne was talking about connection, suddenly had people getting together, and they knew that every single week we could get together, and we talked about food and what it could do, and we would give sort of assignments of things. And then the dumbest thing of all, that I got to tell you, people who would come to our groups would get golden beans. These are 24 karat gold beans. Or I might have spray painted them in my driveway. But in any case, you got a bean if you showed up. Now, in fact, we actually used to do this when we were live in person. These are just virtual beans. And so people would show up, I get my bean for showing up, and they would get another bean if they, you know, did various things. And it was all just imaginary. But people would really, really, really love it. And it could be an 8-week session. 8-week series, 12-week series, 16-week series, whatever it is. When you get to the end, it's like, oh my God, where is everybody? So anyway, the point being, the internet can bring people together. You can teach people really, really well. You can have an expert who knows these things, reach a lot of people really quickly. And so we're doing these now. We're continuing to fight diabetes with food. I got a series starting called Fight Hot Flashes with Food, all the things that are bugging people. And the camaraderie is different depending on kind of the demographic who joins, but it's a cool thing.
So I'm looking at the clock, and we've told the community that we're going to give them a chance to join in this discussion as well. So Jenna, I was wondering if you could pull up how the community can join us, and then what they have to do to get recognized and come on in.
Thanks, Chuck. And Mike, if you can work on pulling up the how to comment slide, I'm going to read the directions. There we go, that one. Okay, for attendees using their computer or WebEx application, if you would like to speak, please use the raised hand icon. You can do this by clicking the participant button, or you can do this by clicking the participant button or icon, the location of which depends on the device you are using. Staff will only acknowledge those attendees during the public comment period who have raised their hand by selecting the hand icon. When you're acknowledged, we will then unmute you. For anyone on the phone using the audio only option, you need to press *3 on your phone's number panel to raise your hand. You'll hear a message that says you have raised your hand to ask a question. Please wait to speak until the host calls on you. When you are acknowledged, you'll be unmuted, and you will hear another message that says you have been unmuted. And then when you're finished your comment, you can press *3 to lower your hand again. And you'll hear a message that says you have lowered your hand. So please note, for anyone wishing to make a public comment, that you have 3 minutes per person in order to accommodate all speakers. So we will pause and see if anyone in the public would like to ask a question. We will look for hands.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, this is part of our fireside chat. So if they want to make a comment, that's fine. If they want to ask questions of our guests or join in our discussion, that's fine too. That's what we're doing this year. Do we see any hands raised?
Do not see any hands, Chuck.
Okay, I'm going to close the fireside chat community part of our meeting and return it to the commission. So I think I want to just see if there's any last questions or comments before we start talking about, as a commission, what we want to take away and recommend as part of our annual report. So commissioners, are there any other comments or questions of our guests? All right, with that, I want to thank Suzanne and Dr. Bernard. I know, Dr. Bernard, I believe you're back east, so you're almost getting to the midnight oil part of the day. But thank you very much, and thank you for staying with us. And this has been an awesome presentation. I know I've learned quite a bit, and I think we've learned some things that we're going to put in practice ourselves as we go out and interact with the community on this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Could I make, if you don't mind, make just a couple of takeaways that you might want to consider?
Yes.
If you don't mind. For hospitals, the AMA has set up some guidelines for healthy hospital food, and you might want to just ask hospitals to implement them. They're 4 years old and have by and large been ignored. Secondly, schools might offer vegan options for kids. That's always an issue, but it's a great thing for kids to be healthy. And third, businesses can do pilot programs where they provide some instruction for people who want to follow a healthier diet, get a group together, and you get that bonding and fun. So those would be things people might want to just try.
Thank you. Suzanne, any final words of wisdom for us before we start talking about what we've heard?
I think just thank you for having me and listening and taking up this this situation or this issue. I think it's huge, and it's just going to get bigger and more important into the future. So really appreciate your focus on it, and anything I can do to help in the future, please let me know.
All right, thank you. Megan, do you have any final words before we move it back to the commission discussion?
No, just echoing that huge thank you to both of you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, so you are our guests. We're welcome to stay and hear what we're talking about, or this is your exit strategy if you want to go off and have some healthy vegetables for a snack. Thank you very much. All right, so commission, what are your thoughts? What do you most hear and want to take away and recommend? Any thoughts here?
Well, one of the issues that keeps popping up in a lot of our presentations that we're hearing from is this need for greater broadband access for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the county is working on this, but I'm wondering if the Commission on Aging, as a policy-focused organization, can in any way influence some of the stuff that's going on in the county to support efforts to increase that access.
Well, I'd have to say, from what I've been hearing the last couple of months, that's a good question. And Dr. Orgiaco earlier talked about encouraging us to have one-on-one discussions with the county councilors, because I'm sure they could have connections or at least help identify where there might be funding opportunities to do things like that, because it is pretty much a big deal. Has been a big deal even before COVID, but COVID showed us where we are lacking as far as bandwidth and broadband. And any others want to join in and on?
So this is Tanya. One of the things that I'm taking a lot away from this conversation. One being just the importance of information and education, getting the right information out, especially for folks who are, who are delivering meals, or who are if it's the food banks or others. So I just think there's an opportunity there. I'm not sure what policy, what that would look like from a policy perspective, but something that should be on our radar.
Thank you.
You know,
Others?
I agree with Tanya. She makes a very point. It's the education. What's the trade-off? You know, when folks and all the good stuff out there to eat and so forth, and you're trading off, what's the benefits? And people understanding what the benefit is that could change your whole life and make your life better, keep you out of the hospital. But it's getting that education across because you're competing with TV. The commercials in TV, the food commercials and so forth, they don't advertise healthy food, not necessarily. It's all good food. And so it's trying to get a communications out there to understand that. I mean, when I deliver Meals on Wheels, I do have sometimes some of the clients will ask, you know, is this good? Should I be getting just fish? Should I not getting meat and so forth? And I flat, you know, why don't you get fish? Because you can get fish and make that order through Meals on Wheels and get specialized meals and so forth. But the knowledge level is just not there. I mean, they're hearing it back and forth, and if they don't hear it from family members to support that and say, this is healthy for you, you need to do this, that's a hard sell for a lot of folks when you've got a lot of habits out there for many folks.
Larry, I want to add in one thing to that too. It's a health equity issue, right? So you brought up such an important point earlier that the food that is not needed, not wanted, is going to the food bank. It's less healthy. It's going to the very, very poor, and we're creating this cycle of disease and illness for the very, very poor. So, I mean, you know, everyone's talking about health equity right now. So maybe that is an angle that we should elevate to help our commissioners or help those who are making the decisions to see that we need to kind of think things differently.
Yeah, I loved the idea of building the communities of conversation, you know, and that was almost directed at the recipients of the food, but thinking about that for people who donate the food. We really haven't, as a culture, really talked about thinking, you know, upstream, downstream, really thinking about what is our intent when we donate. We have a really good feelings about that, but what happens if we're not donating what is healthy? Are we contributing to illness? And so this building communities of conversation just feels very exciting and going in multiple ways with that.
I'm glad we're recording this because Dr. Bernard gave us a 2-minute script to use with people who are wanting to be reassured about the food that we are recommending or that they're eating. And so I hope some way we can put that script into a transcript so we have that available for us in the future. Any other commissioners before we move on? All right, Megan, thank you very much for facilitating this, and staff at Jenna, you and staff did a great job recruiting our guests, and I've been hearing awesome things in the community about how we're able to get both Dr. Bernard and Suzanne here. It's just an awesome thing, so thank you very much. Why don't we go ahead and pull up the agenda? I think the next thing we had was public comment, and I think we kind of covered that, so we didn't get anybody raising their hands. So why don't we move into, is there anybody, I just want to double check. Did you see anybody raising their hands or wanting to, from the community wanting to make some comments?
Chuck, if we could just pause and ask the question, just that this is now would be the time for any general public comment. So not necessarily related to the food as medicine topic. I know we had someone who was planning to speak. I saw him on earlier, but I don't see him on anymore. So maybe we can just pause to see if anyone on would like to speak. Feel free to raise your hand. It would be the same directions as before. Either press *3 on your phone or to click on the hand icon on your screen to raise your hand.
I think Mr. Housley was the one that submitted some comments that were shared with us, so.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see him. So any hands raised?
I don't see any hands. Mr. Housley has sort of hopped on and off a few times, so I'll just keep an eye at the very end to see if he's back on. But I think you can move on to the next portion of the meeting.
Okay, well, the next portion of our meeting is officer elections. We annually elect a chair and vice chair, and this year this has been myself as chair, Larry Smith as vice chair. So this is the time of the year where we look for a new slate of officers for the next year, and they would take office next month. So I'm going to start with chair. Do we have any nominations for chair?
I
Yeah.
nominate Chuck Green for chair.
I second the nomination. This is Tanya.
Thank you. Do we have any other nominations for chair? Do we have any discussion about me? This is so weird. All right, why don't we take a vote? All those in favor of me being chair for the next year, please say aye.
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 Opposed? And I'll abstain. I just have this practice of not voting for myself, so nothing against anybody. All right, next would be vice chair. Do we have any nominations for vice chair?
Yes, I nominate Franklin Johnson.
I second.
Moved and seconded for Franklin Johnson. Do we have any other nominations for vice chair? I'm going to close that. Was moved and seconded for Franklin Johnson to be our vice chair for the next year. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Franklin, who's not here, we will congratulate him as being our vice chair for the next year. So that moves us into our last item, which is way down at the bottom of the screen here. Any communications and announcement? Any COVID-19 updates, Amy, that we haven't heard already in the last week, month?
Well, I think the Department of Public Health does a good job at putting out the latest information. And unfortunately, I dropped the ball in that the most recent talking points that I have are a week old. So maybe we all know this, but the case numbers were decreasing in Clark County. And the number of people, the percent of people vaccinated has gone up to 70%, which I'm not sure what that means in terms of what the governor will do with opening or not opening things, but I think it's a good thing, except there's evidence that the vaccine we have helps people who get the Delta variant of the virus be less sick and have fewer hospitalizations. I read yesterday about other variants, and it's not clear how bad things are going to get before they stay good or get better. But I was thinking as we were planning for virtual and not virtual meetings in the future, I'm still of the opinion, which I've been all along, who knows? It really depends on what happens to the unvaccinated people who have been predicted to be the ones who will get sick. And then we've got all these little kids under age 12 who haven't been vaccinated. Anyway, the vaccine is widely available in Clark County in pharmacies and local medical offices. And if you go to vaccinelocator.doh.wa.gov, you can find vaccine sites. And the largest group that has been vaccinated are older adults. So that's that's good and of interest to us.
Thank you. Any questions of Amy? Any other communications?
So I have a quick update. So this is, it's not really, it's a kind of a non-update, but ADRN, the next meeting for ADRN is in September. I don't know if the ADRN representative is on or not, but that's what I have. And then I attended just last night the sounding board for, I'm so sorry, I'm trying to find my notes, transportation system plan sounding board. It was our first detailed meeting on what we will be addressing. There are a handful of questions that we are asked to really focus in on. And there are a couple of takeaways that I wrote down for us. One is that I was interested in learning a little bit more detail around traffic accidents and the data around those traffic accidents in Clark County and impact to older adults. So as drivers or as being injured within or the other participant in that accident. So that was one, and I think that Greg is going to be looking that up for me. He's moderating the conversations. And then the other question that I had as we were discussing pedestrian activity and the wait period, or the walk sign, how long does a walk sign sit or stay on for someone to cross the road, and just looking at where the crosswalks are and the number of older adults who might be using the pedestrian crosswalks, and using that data to build into the algorithm that tells you how long you're going to allow that crosswalk to remain open for walking. So those were a couple of things, a little bit of details, but I would, if anyone has any thoughts, Chuck, you might have some thoughts with your background, but if anyone has thoughts or want to contribute any conversation with me around just this sounding board, I would love your feedback. So that's that. Let me see. Two more things. So the questions that we'll follow up next week, well, they're all around policy. So if you have any comments that you would like to make or things that you want me to be aware of to voice for the commission, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Any questions of Tanya? All right, any other updates? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, and we will see you next month.
Thank you, Megan. Nice job.
Wonderful.
Well done. Bye, guys.
Good talk.